Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the WhatsOnStage Podcast with me, Sarah Crompton.
And me, Alex Wood.
And we're out and about. We're at Sonia Friedman Productions West End office.
Very flashy office with lots of trophies adorning many walls. Yes.
More trophies than you can shake a stick at. As people know, Sonia Friedman's more than 300 productions have won 48 Tonys and 63 Olivier Awards. They have really changed the face of both the West End and Broadway, and currently include the very exciting Stereophonic, which is about to open in London. So that's why we're here, to have a chat to Sonia. And we're here just as you're about to go to New York for the Tonys. How many Tonys are you nominated for this time?
21, I think. And I say I think, and I don't mean that in sort of faux modesty. There's this play Eureka Day, which we produced over here, and then we licensed it to the Manhattan Theatre Club, and we're very involved in it. But technically I'm taking those two on as well. Right. But Hills of California, Stranger Things, and Dead Outlaw are the three shows that I am lead producer on. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a huge thing after Stereophonic last year, which is about to open in. Well, has in fact started.
We're in previews as we're talking. Yes.
So, and will open in London. And as anybody who's listened to this podcast knows, I'm obsessed with Stereophonic.
Oh, that's good. I'm so pleased, because actually I don't know how many British theatre critics know it, have seen it. Yeah. I'm not aware of it really.
I think that the WhatsOnStage podcast could be renamed the Stereophonic Phantom. Mostly Sarah. I'm an album devotee, I would say. Yes. I've been Masquerade is basically the song I wake up to every morning.
Will Butler, exclusive here, has written a new song based on one of the album tracks that's referred to in the show but never heard, called Dark Night. So in fact, that's literally just been written and performed by this company. And I think we're going to do an exclusive in a week or two on the radio.
How exciting. That is brilliant. I mean, that's what's so wonderful about it. And I must say, when I went to see it on New York, I was actually on holiday, I think. And I did just go, and I was saying that I had one of the great theatrical nights of my life, because I went Stereophonic as the matinee, and then Merrily We Roll Along in the evening, which was just, obviously
a good
like
Sonia Friedman
tribute.
Yes. Oh, my goodness me, I have to say Merrily. Oh, wow. So, but yes. So we'll come on to Merrily maybe later.
What occurred to me was how you, and I was interested you were producing Stereophonic on Broadway, because obviously what we're used to is things going the other way.
Yes.
So what was it about Stereophonic that made you think, oh my God, I've got to put this show on?
It's quite a complicated and long answer to this. But it's partly related to the fact that I do tend to bring my plays, the plays I produce, to New York a lot. And actually, I felt that the traffic was unfair. I felt that we weren't bringing enough work, really great work, from New York to London. Right. And as a producer, I'd been very lucky to be responsible for five out of the 6 or 4 out of the 5 last Tony-winning plays. And it just got me thinking, and they were all the plays that we'd brought from, and in fact, including Lehman Trilogy, which I didn't produce. It was, the Brits had won play after play after play after play after play on Broadway. And I genuinely thought that it was sort of like time for a pause, actually. And I wanted to sort of immerse myself in American writing. And this play had arrived on our desk before it opened off Broadway, and we fell in love with the play and the ambition of it and the scale of it and this whole. I almost sort of think of it as sort of Chekhovian way of these people, these artists, sort of just spending time with one another over such a huge amount of time, but the messiness of life and the messiness of making art. And I, on the page, fell in love with it, but had no idea what it was going to be like. I said this is a long-winded answer. And then we expressed our very keen interest in transferring it from Playwrights Horizon, which is where it started. And I was going to go over to see it and hopefully, as it were, seal the deal. But Stranger Things stopped me going, because Stranger Things was much bigger than I'd anticipated. And it was opening off Broadway absolutely at the same time as Stranger Things was moving into tech and preview. Right. So it was impossible for me to get away. So I did something that I've never done before, which is I basically begged them to let me be the Broadway producer alongside the other producers involved, even though I said I'm not going to be able to see it.
Wow.
With the promise that I would bring it to London.
So that's a real gamble. I mean, it's huge.
Yes.
Huge gamble.
It was a big gamble, but I believed in it so much. But yes, it was a gamble because I'd never worked with a director before. I'd never worked with a writer before. I'd never, it was a completely new group of artists for me. But I believed in the work. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I did get to see it on Broadway after I'd committed to seeing it, because I never got to see it off Broadway. I never made it because it was such a short run. So the first time I saw it was on Broadway when I was the producer. Obviously, I had very, very great producing partners with me. So I don't take that credit, but over here, it's the plan worked out.
Yeah, certainly did.
So good luck with cutting that.
I think that was perfectly formed. One of the striking things about this play, but also I think this is a recurring trend for SFP programming, is finding West End shows that might not naturally feel like they're going to land in the West End, like a play, like Stereophonic. But you've spoken about this before, but where's the itch to sort of know, that audiences might really go for that, or they might be really intrigued by that?
It's the question I'm always asked, and I genuinely don't know how to answer it. It's just about an instinct, a feeling. The more I do this job, the more I have to trust my body, my visceral reaction to something, be it a goosebump or a vibration, and I can't describe it any more than that. It's how I feel when I read something, when I see something, or when I'm talking to a writer, a director, an artist about something. If I can visualize it off the page when I'm reading it, if I get excited, and crucially, if it surprises me. I think this is what I've talked about quite a lot, which is if I'm ahead of the play, and I'm sure that's the same for you as a critic, and for audiences, that if I'm ahead of the play, I'm not fully invested. Yeah. I don't want to know what happens next. I don't want to have worked it out. I want the writer, I want the production, I want the actor to take me to places that I didn't know I was going, and to be excited, exhilarated, thrilled, and to feel like this is the freshest thing, the newest thing I've encountered. I also get very excited about two things. Seeing other people's stories and sort of shining a light on that. But also, again, I think this is what happens as I'm getting a bit older, seeing myself reflected on stage, which is why when I saw The Years, which I had nothing to do with creating, I just went along to the Almeida Theatre and I literally fell in love. And I thought, this is the first time for I don't know how long, if maybe ever, that I've seen myself on stage. So it's a combination of both. It's seeing others, shining that light on others, but it's also now realising that I've not seen enough stories about women like me.
Yeah. I thought that we've talked about that before, that I thought the extraordinary thing about the years was exactly that, and that what happened particularly to women in the audience, almost regardless of age. So I went with my niece who's in her 20s, but they saw themselves in that play, or they saw their grandparent in that play.
Exactly.
And there was something extraordinary about being a mainly woman audience, which is very, very rare.
It's very rare. And I think that's absolutely right. But the men that did go, the common theme was, I wish I'd seen that with my mother.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to bring my mother. So yes, I mean, surprise, excitement, vibrations.
It does cover an extraordinary range of work. So we were talking. Yeah. So there were two things that made me laugh. I've never seen your 300 odd productions written out as they are on this press release. It's extraordinary to see them, and actually it goes over the page, just goes on and on.
What's the first one?
Spoonface Steinberg.
You see, that's only commercial.
Yeah.
What that doesn't do is go into the work I produced prior to coming into the West End, which was all my work at the National Theatre and with this company, Out of Joint, which I co-founded. And that's probably about another 15 plays.
Amazing amount. And it's the range. So if you look at the moment, you've got Stereophonic, but you've also got Paddington in development, and I think that's the thing that fascinates me about the range, and the fact that it's clear that you're passionate about them all at the same level.
Yes, I am.
So, yeah.
How?
What's
the question?
Yes, it is.
What's the question?
Yes.
Well, I can't answer that, obviously. I mean, it's like, it's the reason I can't answer it is because it's like saying, why do you like the taste of trout and chocolate eclairs? I just do. But I think in relation to everything goes back to childhood. I've discovering.
Yes.
I think we all know that. As a child, my creative influences were primarily musical, and primarily actually classical musical, but I was steeped in music growing up. So there was always an assumption that I would become a musician. So music is very much at the centre of what drives me. But it's not just not just composed music. It's like musicality of language, rhythm of a piece, rhythm of a play. So I absolutely love the musical. I'm obsessed, like many of us, with Sondheim. Sondheim, thanks to my sister Maria, was somebody who I was introduced to very, very early on in my life, when I was a teen. So there was that strand running, and then I had no idea about my interest in new work until I was incredibly fortunate, very, very early on in my career, to sit next to Harold Pinter in the rehearsal room when he was directing his new play, Mountain Language.
Okay.
I was basically a kid. I was just out of drama school. I got given this job of being his DSM, Deputy Stage Manager, which, for anybody that knows that's the person that sits next to the writer and the director and basically marks up the prompt script and does all the blocking and stuff like that. And Pinter took me under his wing very, very early on in my career. And then I went from Pinter to a series of other new plays by... directed by the writer, Athol Fugard, Alan Bennett, it was all in a very, very short period of time at the National. This was when I was a stage manager. And I very quickly realised that new work, new writing, and be able to see it literally in the room by these giants. I wasn't aware they were giants at the time. You know, I think when you're 20, 21, you don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
I do know that people around me, my elders and my mother, they were like incredibly impressed and excited that I was working with these extraordinary writers. I don't think I took it in a way that's quite good.
Yeah.
Because I think if I'd have actually understood how enormous it was, the responsibility of sitting next to Harold Pinter in a rehearsal room, and that's actually, I think, why he took me under his wing, because I wasn't in awe of him in the way that many were. I, of course, later was completely in awe of him and got more and more overwhelmed with the extraordinary privilege of working with him. So yes, new writing. I fell in love with new writing and new work and the process. And so very quickly after that, I resigned from being a stage manager because I was too interested in the whole process. I couldn't just put myself into one channel, even though obviously it means that I will always understand the crucial part of what a stage manager does in a show. That wasn't for me.
Which is handy to understand.
Yeah. I was scrolling through your channel, your Instagram feed on SFP this morning, whilst trying to keep a baby awake, and there was what's so striking is seeing hopping between Stereophonic and Paddington and Mean Girls, which is just about to close in the West End. What's striking about your company compared to so many is that you do sit across both sides of the Atlantic simultaneously, and now obviously a portion of your staff are based there full time. That gives you almost a unique perspective on the two different ecosystems and how they vary. Do you feel like there is more of a divergence now than there ever has been before? You've spoken about cost, for example, but taste as well, or audience sort of expectation?
I mean, obviously, there is... It's really... I'm finding it harder and harder to cross the Atlantic because it's the difference in our work. Not the work on stage. There's still the same love and passion that everybody puts into their work, both sides of the Atlantic. But the challenges on Broadway are beyond belief now. And I've been very public about this, and I will never stop being public about this, which is I genuinely believe the model is broken on Broadway. I've spoken about it. I've spoken about it publicly, and I will never ever stop believing that Broadway will find an answer. It's the most extraordinary place to work. The audiences are amazing. The artists are amazing. But what is not amazing is how very, very hard it is to be creative on Broadway when a musical or a play can cost 6, 8, 10, and of course, in the case of the bigger musicals, 20, 30, $40 million.
Yeah.
And then the running costs. It's the running costs actually that are the most terrifying. That a play here in the West End can cost, I don't know, 150 to 200,000 a week to run. That's a slightly bigger play. You know, something like Harry Potter is much more than that. Stranger Things is much more than that. But, you know, an average standard play. That play on Broadway will cost 600,000.
Oh gosh, that's amazing.
Ish.
Yeah.
Maybe more. And if you just sort of like quickly do those maths on the how much you need to make a week to cover your running costs and to recoup your initial capital, plays need to be, doing 700,000-800,000 a week.
Yeah.
And that is really challenging. Now, every now and then, a play will come along, Stereophonic, that will do that. And for so long as there are every now and then something that comes along to do that, the system sort of creaks on, because there are always shows to break that pattern.
Yeah.
But it's very, very hard place to work in terms of feeling creatively free. And we talk at this moment, I'm not sure when this podcast comes out, but we talk at this moment just as the Tony awards are coming up, and you've got this really, really difficult period where you have 25 shows all opening in the same couple of months, all vying for the same audience, all needing attention, all needing to do really great business. And imagine it over here.
Yeah.
Imagine us having to open that number of shows, and then, by the way, they all don't. Then there's this cut-off.
Yeah.
And then nothing opens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
For months.
It's...
It's.
And in fact, things close, don't they, as well, because they haven't been
there will
entertaining.
be a slew of closings in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that it's right, because, and I've not seen every show on Broadway this season, so I can't comment on the work of it all, but a lot of it is really, really good. And it's just not given enough time.
Yeah.
It's not given enough time to find the audience, to settle into its rhythm, because they announced the Broadway grosses, which I think is, I hate that.
Well, yeah.
Because you're already, before you've even been given a chance, you're already like, you're a hit or you're not, based on the numbers. Yeah. And in New York and in Broadway, success is defined by your gross. It's not defined by what is on that stage, what the audience are feeling, how and over here in London, as we know, you can a show can open and it can find its own rhythm, it can find its own audience, and if a show should run, it will. But I think some plays on Broadway and some shows on Broadway are not given that chance to find the audience and get into a rhythm, because there's too much against them in terms of their running costs and how much they are all fighting for the same airtime, for the same publicity, the same promotion. That we're all lobbying at the same time. The Tony voters are inundated. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I just want to be clear. I love working there, and I won't stop working there. I just want the community, all of us, and I consider myself part of the community, even though I speak with an English accent. I want all of us to come together and just sort of face this. The costs are just too high.
How much was the setting up together with Hugh Jackman part of an answer to that? Because those two shows have now opened, and in fact, the reviews have been
amazing.
Yeah. So, so this model of having very simple, very bare bones productions does seem to have appeal for audiences.
Yes,
so
one of my favourite quotes actually was from the New York Times about one of the plays, the play that Hugh Jackman's in, that said, if I'm going to paraphrase, if this is theatre on a shoestring, who needs shoes?
Yeah.
And I want to be careful how I answer this, because it's not a rejection of Broadway. What this is actually about is Hugh Jackman inspired this idea. Hugh wanted very much, it was based on the experience we had with Hugh Jackman, Ian Rickson, myself and Jez Butterworth on the river that we did, it turns out, over 12 years ago now. Something.
Yeah, long time.
Time is going very fast. But Hugh loved being part of a company. He loved being part of an ensemble. He loved the process. He loved being in a room. He loved the lack of pressure on him. Hugh Jackman in.
Yeah.
And we came together actually during the pandemic and took a walk around Hyde Park. And we talked at that time about what we were looking for in the next phase of our lives and our careers. And then this is 5 years ago, so we've evolved even since then. But the bottom line, what we all felt, the three of us, was we sort of wanted to go back to how we started, without those commercial pressures, without those financial pressures. When we did our work above a pub theatre, and that it was, and of course Ian is his aesthetic, the Royal Court bentwood chair, you can go anywhere. Yeah. You can go anywhere on a bentwood chair. Empty stage, beautiful lighting. And so it was about going back to the basics of what got us into theatre. Back to what I was saying. New work, sitting in a room with a new play, with an actor, with a director, with a writer, and that being our focus, but alongside that, new audiences.
Yeah.
Accessibility. Trying our best to find the new generation of audiences, and also audiences that sometimes couldn't afford to see actors like Hugh Jackman up close, really close. I mean, like as close as we are here.
Yeah, which is so fabulous, exciting.
And I had no idea how we were going to pull it off, but the minute Hugh said, "Let's do this," and we formed this company that's called Together. Let's do this together, and let's really commit to this. That was all I needed.
Off you go.
And off I went. Yeah. And it's a real thing. It has genuinely worked. And I couldn't have said that 2 months ago. But the work is exceptional. The work is literally world class. We didn't know that when we embarked on this. We don't miss the fact that there aren't. I mean, we're 2 plays in rep. It takes 10 minutes to move from one play into the other play. Wow. It's extraordinary. We literally just move a chair and a couple of tables, and then into the other play. But you walk into that theatre and you feel like you're in a completely different space, just by the way we've lit it, by the furnishing. No, the aesthetic is working, and for
Are
me,
they going to come here? Are we going?
We really hope so. Hugh is really committed to this, and I think he really, really wants to take it wherever he possibly can. But it's a bit like pop-up theatre because it's we could come here just for a few days. Yeah. We don't have to do a full run. But it's as I've said to Hugh and Ian a few times. I would walk into this little space that we were doing. It's not that little. It's 400 seats. We're doing it with Audible at the Minetta Lane at the moment. I literally felt like I was pulling down the oxygen mask, and I could breathe. Yeah. Because the job I do, the work I do, is so immense, and the responsibility so huge. The number of people I'm responsible for, and the money and the investment and the scale and the expectation has it's big, and it's sometimes very, very daunting.
Well, actually, to that point, one of the most impressive things I've seen on Netflix in the last 6 months was the unflinching documentary that was put out about the making of Stranger Things, The First Shadow in the West End, which I think for anyone who works anywhere in theatre is compulsory viewing, because the insight that it gives into the process of bringing a gargantuan production to London is unparalleled. But what was it like for you watching that back, seeing that now?
Well, I mean, let me tell you, a load was edited out.
Even worse.
It was very. It was, and I've said this. It is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Because the technical ambition, I just didn't know we could put it off, and we ran out of time.
Yeah.
And that's true in the documentary. That wasn't made up. We literally ran out of time. It was so big. It was so complicated. We were in a theatre way too small for what we'd actually set out to do. Stephen and the full creative team with Justin, they drove us. And I drove people too, because I wanted this to be like nothing people had ever seen before. And because I'd had Harry Potter behind me, I was also aware that we had to do something different to that, because I don't think you can better Harry Potter in terms of stage magic, illusion, the old Victoriana way of developing and creating, a story. But I didn't see the documentary until we were in New York doing Stranger Things. So it was very strange, because the Broadway production is double the scale and size of the West End production. So when we were looking back at that documentary, it was like, my God, you should see what we're doing now. Yeah. But we'd actually at least had the benefit of doing it once. But I was very, very, very... I was thrilled that Netflix wanted to invest in a documentary about theatre, because, it's the biggest streaming platform on the planet.
Yeah.
They really, really have supported us and theatre. They love it. Ted Sarandos is the most incredible advocate. And he's passionate about theatre, and he's passionate about this piece of work. And he can't believe what we've pulled off. And I think he wanted the world to see it. So I agree with you. I think it's absolutely essential viewing for anybody who's interested in working or interested in how theatre works from behind the scenes.
And it is so good to show that, because I'm conscious we're reached the end of your time, but one of the things is that people do have this attitude towards theatre in London because it looks successful, because thanks to you, among others, there are so many exciting creative things coming on. It is quite good to be reminded of the stresses going on behind the scenes, and also the stresses on the industry as a whole. I know it's not the same as Broadway, but how much do you feel that the West End, is now under stress itself, in terms of getting the lively economy that we've all
as you say, it's very, very difficult for me, because I work pretty much equally in both cities. I come back to London, and relative to how challenging it is on Broadway, I look at our system and our ecosystem, and I go, we're okay. If I take that out, if I take the comparison out, because we don't want to compare ourselves with something that is so clearly troubled in terms of an ecosystem, I think there's a lot to be worried about. I think I am worried about the fact that when I put together my business plans, my business models, the budgets for shows over here, it's more than creeping up. It's going up rapidly, much more than the rate of inflation.
Right.
The cost to put on a show. This started pandemic time. But what it hasn't done is rectified itself. Post-pandemic, when we were scrambling to come back to work, understandably, there was things cost a lot more then. There was a supply chain issue. The shops are more expensive. We still are dealing with a staff shortage. of the really, really wonderful people that can work backstage. That's really challenging.
That's interesting.
Because we lost a lot of them during the pandemic to telly, film, other medium. So there's a staff issue, but I think in terms of the creative issues. This is a podcast in of itself, really. In terms,
we'll invite you back.
But actually, it is a podcast in itself about where is theatre going, what is theatre going to be in the next generation, because of arts training, drama training, the pressure on actors to be TV, film, streaming stars. The fact that the actors of the older generation, that extraordinary training you'd get in the regional theatre, doing your year or two there, and then coming into London and having a career that crossed between film, telly, theatre. I think my biggest concern is that we're not getting the actors through that can sustain our industry, given that a lot of our industry does rely on stars. And I don't mean, and when I say stars, and I know a lot of people, critics, sort of can be critical of the star casting, it's as ever thus. Theatre has always had stars, be it John Gielgud, Peggy Ashcroft, whoever it is. But what is a theatre star now isn't a theatre star of what it was, 100 years ago. Because actors have different careers now. But my concern is that we need actors to commit for 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 16 weeks because of the business model changing, because it becoming more and more expensive. It's very, very hard to run a play for less than 12 weeks. But if you're a star that also wants to do other things, it's the commitment, it's the time commitment. So that's a concern. So it's about how we bring our audiences with us to not always expecting the star. I use that in inverted commas. And look, we look at some of the work that has been very successful. I go back to the years. Now, obviously, it had Gina McKee and Romola Garai and great actors in it, but you wouldn't call them, movie stars, marquee stars in the way that you would call George Clooney. I mean, obviously, he's a one-off, but
many ways.
But I think the thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about is our audience is going to come to theatre just because it's really, really, really good, and really good meaning outstandingly good. And I still think, yes, they will, which means that we as commercial producers will have to work even tighter and more closely with the not-for-profit, the subsidised sector. I think we've got a really essential role to play now in a way that we probably have never had before because of the funding crisis and because sponsorship is harder to come by for obvious reasons, that I think there can be even closer relationships between the commercial sector and the subsidised sector where we can encourage and enhance new artists and innovation, and that will feed the West End in an incredibly new way. I see. So whilst the funding crisis is terrible, I also think it's an incredible opportunity for commercial and subsidised to come much closer than we already are, and I think we're pretty close already.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's all we have time for with you, Sonia. Thank you so much for joining us on the WhatsOnStage podcast. We'll have to have you back because there's so much more to discuss.
And it is wonderful that you've ended on such a positive note as well, because I do think that, that idea of what you've brought to theatre in both in this country and indeed in the States, has been wonderful. So to go on developing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming to talk to us.
It means a lot. Thank you.
We barely got time to talk about Merrily We Roll Along, so we'd have to,
film.
we'd have to come back for the film.
The film.
Oh, yes. Go on, tell us very quickly.
So Sony Picture Classics have picked up the distribution.
Hooray.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I have... I saw the nearly final cut a week or so ago, and Maria Friedman, my sister, she directed the film as well, and it's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's not a capture, I'll tell you that much.
Ooh.
It's like a film in its own right. It's Maria has created a sort of almost like a new genre. The close-up, I've seen Merrily in a completely new way through the editing and the process Maria and her team have been through. She's taken 6 months to edit this, pretty much full time.
Wow. That's so exciting.
It's unbelievable.
She'll really look forward to it.
Yeah, I think the only huge sadness for us is that Stephen Sondheim's not here to see it.
Yeah.
Because he was so proud of what Maria was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, we will do it. We'll do another podcast with you and Maria for the release. And thank you so much for that. Thank you, Sonia. It's really lovely to see you.
And yes, hope all goes well with the Tonys.
Yeah.